Welcome back to AIPOP. You guys, SNL just pulled a wild card.
Okay, you've got my attention.
But Shane Gillis.
Who?
Shane Gillis, remember him?
Oh, yeah.
Fired back in 2019 for some pretty controversial jokes.
Yeah.
And now he's back hosting for like the second time since then.
Wow. Talk about a comeback.
Right.
I'm curious to see how he navigated this return, especially after SNL's huge 50th anniversary bash.
Right. That anniversary special was massive, like 220 million viewers across 3 broadcasts.
Oh, wow.
And get this, almost 4 billion minutes of content were watched.
That's incredible. It really speaks to the impact SNL has had on our culture over the years. You know, it's amazing to think about all the iconic moments and legendary performers who've graced that stage.
And speaking of SNL alumni, we actually have some interesting insights from a couple of them.
Oh, really?
Matthew Lawrence, who you might remember from his time on the show, has been pretty vocal about his love for this season. He even called Timothy Chalamet a top 5 host of all time.
That's high praise. Chalamet does have a certain charm and comedic timing. It's interesting to see how he's transitioned from dramatic roles to hosting SNL. What about Bobby Moynihan? Has he weighed in on the current season?
He has. He admitted that he doesn't always catch the show live anymore, but he makes sure to watch every episode. He's also a big fan of the current cast, and even compared their growth to watching your favorite sports team improve over time.
I love that analogy. It perfectly captures that sense of excitement and investment that fans have. Okay, so back to Shane Gillis. His return to Studio 8H is definitely a hot topic. It feels like a completely different world than in 2019, particularly when it comes to what's considered acceptable in comedy.
You're telling me I feel like the line is constantly shifting and it's hard to know where it stands sometimes, but regardless, Gillis jumped right back into the political fray with the cold open, which tackled Trump's meeting with Zelensky at the White House.
Always a source of comedic inspiration, right? I'm curious, how did they portray it?
It was like a slightly awkward reenactment of that infamous press conference. You know, with James Austin Johnson as Trump and Bowen Yang as J.D. Vance.
Oh, yeah.
And Marcelo Hernandez playing a very out there. Marco Rubio and Mikey Day even popped in as Zelensky.
Sounds like they had all the key players, any surprise cameos.
Oh, yeah. Mike Myers appeared as Elon Musk, which I thought was pretty interesting. It seems like you might be taking over that impression from Dana Carvey.
Myers definitely has a knack for creating iconic SNL characters. So did the cold open live up to the comedic potential of the situation?
Honestly, I thought it fell a little flat. I mean, the real-life events were so bizarre and ripe for satire, but the sketch just didn't quite hit the mark. For me, it almost felt like they were trying to avoid being too edgy, which ironically made it less funny.
I see what you mean. Sometimes playing it safe can actually backfire, especially in comedy. So how did Gillis handle his monologue? Did he address the elephant in the room?
He did. He started by joking about how disappointed he was that we wouldn't be seeing another Trump debate. He said he enjoyed Trump's 5th grade level ideas like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America and maybe annexing Greenland.
Classic Gillis, finding humor in the absurdity of politics. Did the audience seem receptive to his style?
It was definitely a mixed bag. Some people were laughing while others seemed a little hesitant. You could tell that not everyone was on board with his brand of humor. Yeah. He even went so far as to compare being a liberal to being a cis from Star Wars.
Whoa, okay, that's a bold comparison. Did that joke land?
It got a few laughs, but it was definitely polarizing. It's clear that Gillis isn't afraid to push buttons and make people think, even if it makes them uncomfortable.
I think that's what makes him such a fascinating figure in comedy. He really forces us to confront our own biases and question what we find acceptable. It's not always easy, but it's definitely a conversation worth having. Before we dive into the sketches, do you know what else is a conversation worth having?
Tell me.
Talking about this podcast, if you're enjoying this deep dive into Shane Gillis's return to SNL, hit that like button and subscribe to AIPLP for more insightful discussions like this one.
Absolutely. We love bringing you these deep dives into pop culture, and your support means the world to us. Okay, so let's talk about some of the standout sketches from the episode. One that really cracked me up was Winery Tour. It featured Shane Gillis and Heidi Gardner as a couple on a wine tour with his parents. And Heidi's character, the hot girlfriend, completely stole the show.
Oh, I love Heidi Gardner. She's such a comedic powerhouse. What made her performance so hilarious in this sketch?
But she was incredibly demanding and kept asking Gillis's character to take pictures of her in front of an orange tree.
Oh, wow.
like laughing a boomerang one for the veterans. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
She even thought she looked like Michael Cera.
That's so funny. I can totally picture her pulling that off. She has such a knack for playing those slightly unhinged characters.
And it gets even better, she tells him. So the direction is be a man. Her character just keeps getting more and more persistent. It was classic Heidi.
It sounds like she completely nailed it. You know, that this actually ties in perfectly with what Matthew Lawrence was saying about her earlier.
Oh, yeah, how so?
He specifically mentioned how impressed he's been with her work this season and praised her versatility, he said. And in every sketch she's in, she's really funny, but she's really different. I think she's amazing.
It's so true. She brings such a unique energy to every role she plays. And it's great that they're giving her more opportunities to shine outside of her usual update appearances.
Absolutely. It's like they're finally realizing her full comedic potential. Speaking of shining, another sketch that really stood out for me was Midday News 2.
Yeah.
Kenan Thompson and Ego Enwoodum play these news anchors who are visibly relieved when they find out the crimes they're reporting on were committed by white people.
Oh, yeah, I loved that one. It was such a clever commentary on racial bias in the media, the way they turned the tables and made the anchors happy about the perpetrators being white. Really highlighted the absurdity of it all.
It was brilliant satire, and it's a perfect example of how comedy can be used to address serious social issues in a way that makes you think while you're laughing.
Totally. And the competitive dynamic between the anchors and Shane Gillis and Heidi Gardner, who were also part of the sketch, just added another layer of humor to it. Plus, there were all those Maryland references, which made me wonder if Ego Enwoodum, being from Baltimore, had a hand in writing it.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. It definitely felt like a sketch that was close to her heart. So what about Mike Myers as Elon Musk? Did he pop up again in any other sketches?
He did. There was this hilarious Please Don't Destroy sketch called The Sound, which was a parody of The Voice. Gillis played this older, kind of creepy singer whose main musical influence is Chris Brown.
Oh, wow.
And guess what? He ends up in a music video with Tate McRae.
The musical guest, that's such a fun twist. I love how Please Don't Destroy always manages to bring in these unexpected cameos. Speaking of Tate McRae, did she get a chance to shine on Weekend Update?
She didn't appear in any of the update segments, which I thought was a bit of a missed opportunity, but she did perform twice during the episode. She sang Sports Car, which has that infectious Pussycat Dolls vibe, and Dear God, which is a more introspective song about trying to get someone out of your head.
I've had Sports Car on repeat all week. It's such a bop, and Dear God is so relatable. We've all been there, right? Trying to move on from someone who's stuck in your thoughts.
Absolutely. Speaking of relatable, Weekend Update itself had some pretty solid jokes. Michael Che had a great bit about how he's outlasted both Lester Holt and Joy Reid at NBC. There was also a funny segment about the challenges of dating as a single person these days.
That resonates with a lot of people, for sure. Navigating the dating scene can be a real comedy of errors in itself. Any other memorable moments from Update?
Oh, yeah. Che also made this hilarious observation about the musical duo Silk Sonic. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, they're like, if The Temptations was fronted by a dude who looks like he's about to fight a Ninja Turtle.
Oh my gosh, that's classic Chess. So sharp and observational. Okay, so apart from the sketches we've already talked about, were there any others that stood out?
There was this one called Doctor's Visit, where Gillis played a guy getting a physical from a former classmate who remembers a very embarrassing incident from their past involving a slinkia. It was full of that silly, almost juvenile humor, but it had this surprisingly sweet ending, and it was great to see Emil Wakim, who played the doctor, get a chance to shine. He's such a talented performer who doesn't always get the spotlight.
I agree. It's always fun to see the supporting players get their moment. And speaking of moments, did you catch that R.I.P. title card at the end of the episode?
Yes, it was for Buster Poindexter, a.k.a. David Johansen, who was a frequent guest on SNL back in the 80s. I wonder if his passing inspired them to bring back some of those classic characters from that era.
That would be amazing. It would be a great way to pay tribute to his legacy and introduce a new generation to his comedic brilliance. You know, it's interesting how Shane Gillis's return kind of mirrored what happened in the cold open.
What do you mean?
Well, remember how we were saying that the cold open had so much potential but ultimately felt a bit flat?
Yeah.
It's almost like they were trying so hard to avoid offending anyone that they ended up sacrificing the humor.
I totally see that. And I feel like that's a risk a lot of comedians are facing these days, the fear of being canceled for pushing the boundaries too far.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance, and it makes you wonder if comedy is losing its edge in today's hypersensitive culture.
But then again, there's something to be said for comedy that challenges our perspectives and makes us think outside of our comfort zones.
You're so right. Comedy has always been a powerful tool for social commentary and sparking important conversations.
And sometimes the most thought-provoking humor comes from those who aren't afraid to court controversy. Think about some of the greatest comedic legends. They often push the envelope and challenge societal norms.
Exactly. They made us laugh, but they also made us think and sometimes even squirm a little.
It's true, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of comedy, its ability to simultaneously entertain and provoke.
Speaking of provoking, did you hear what Mike Myers said during the Good Nights?
Fill me in.
He just casually declared, Canada is not for sale.
Whoa. What was that about? Do you think he was making a political statement or just being his usual quirky self?
It's hard to say, but it definitely left me wondering, and that's what good comedy does, right? It sparks curiosity and gets people talking.
You know, it seems like every time Shane Gillis returns to SNL, it sparks a lot of conversation, both good and bad. What do you think? Did he redeem himself this time around?
It's tough to say. I think his comedy is definitely polarizing, and he's not afraid to push buttons. But at the end of the day, it's up to each individual to decide whether or not they find him funny.
No.
What do you think? Did you enjoy his return to SNL?
You know, this whole thing with Gillis has really got me thinking about, like, the role of controversy in comedy.
Yeah, me too. It's like walking a tightrope,
Right.
trying to be funny and provocative
Right.
without totally like alienating your audience.
Yeah, and it feels like that line keeps shifting, especially these days.
It does. It really does. What might have been edgy or even shocking a few years ago could be totally off limits now.
Totally.
And that makes it even harder for comedians to like navigate those boundaries.
For sure.
It's funny how Shane Gillis's return kind of mirrored what we were talking about with the cold open.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, remember how we felt like the cold open had so much potential,
Yeah.
but it ultimately felt kind of flat?
Yeah, we say it felt like they were playing it too safe.
Exactly. It's almost as if they were so worried about offending anyone that they ended up sacrificing the humor,
Right.
they were holding back, which ironically made the sketch less effective.
That's a really good point, and I feel like that's a struggle a lot of comedians are facing these days. The fear of being canceled or facing backlash for pushing the boundaries too far.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance, and it makes you wonder if comedy is losing its edge because of it. But then again, there's something to be said for comedy that challenges our perspectives and makes us think outside of our comfort zones, right?
You're right. Comedy has always been a powerful tool for social commentary and sparking important conversations. And sometimes the most thought-provoking humor comes from those who aren't afraid to court little controversy.
Precisely, think about some of the greatest comedic legends. I mean, they often push the envelope and challenge societal norms.
Yeah.
They made us laugh, but they also made us think critically about the world around us.
So where does that leave us with Shane Gillis? Is his brand of humor ultimately helpful or harmful?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It really depends on how you interpret his intentions. Is he genuinely trying to make people laugh and spark thoughtful discussion, or is he simply seeking attention through provocation?
It's definitely something to think about. And it's a conversation that's likely to continue as long as he keeps performing. I think the important thing is that we continue to engage in these discussions and be open to different perspectives, even when they make us uncomfortable.
I completely agree, and I think this deep dive has given us a lot to consider, both about Shane Gillis and the evolving landscape of comedy in general. It's been a fascinating journey through the highs and lows of his return to SNL, and it's left us with some really thought-provoking questions about the boundaries of humor and the role of controversy in entertainment.
Before we wrap up this conversation, we want to hear from you. Did you find Shane Gillis funny? Was his return to SNL justified? What was your favorite sketch? Let us know in the comments below.
And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to AIPOP for more deep dives like this. We'll be back soon with more insightful discussions on all things pop culture. Until then, keep thinking critically and keep laughing, even if it's a little uncomfortable sometimes.